What's up, guys? Welcome back to Tidal Gardens. In this video, I am going to talk about some very slow growing corals. And you may think that's a negative, but there is a very good reason for folks to look out for slower growing corals. Generally speaking, in this hobby, people want faster growing stuff because the buying behavior these days a lot of times centers around purchasing frags and watching them grow in the tank. That is kind of one of the more fun aspects of this hobby. Now, the reason why you might be interested in slower growing stuff is because you might be space constrained. The faster growing stuff will just eat up all of that real estate. Also, faster growing corals, they tax your water chemistry quite a lot more. They are going to be consuming a lot more trace elements, so you might run into situations where you've bottomed out certain kinds of trace and end up getting some really bad results in your reef. Similarly, very fast growing corals, they're going to impact your flow patterns. Every coral is eventually going to get large, hopefully, but water flow is one of those things that's going to be impacted pretty severely as corals grow in. Those would be the three biggest obstacles with fast growing corals that you avoid with slower growing corals. Let's hop right into this list. I've got 5 corals for you and 1 runner-up. Starting first with the runner-up, it's Pectinia. I absolutely love this coral. We are actively collecting all the really cool strains of it because they are kind of tricky to come by. And they grow slow, but just fast enough that it makes sense for us to propagate. Now, the coral farm here is something between 10 to 15,000 gallons. It varies. My point there is we have to dedicate so much space to compensate for its slower growth rate that it is an issue. But having said that, Pectinia is one of those corals that is a good target for long-term aquaculture if you can dedicate the resources to it. That's the only reason why it didn't make it into the top 5. The first coral on this list is Favia brain corals. Favia isn't a real category in the reef aquarium hobby, so I'll be a little bit more specific. It's the Celastria variety of brain corals. Things like the reverse prism, things like the dragon soul. These guys are incredibly slow growing. We are attempting to have a long-term aquaculture program for these guys, but they're easily one of the slowest large polyp stony corals, which is a little bit frustrating because in that Favia umbrella, you also have things like Dipsastria and Favites. Very fast growing, very easy to propagate. So we have to come up with all kinds of tips and tricks for these slower growing varieties to make them pick up the pace a little bit. Things like feeding and trace additions, all the things. Okay, next on the list. This is a threefer. I'm going to throw in Scolies. I'm going to throw in Acanthophilia, Cinerina, and what the heck? Let's throw in another one, Trachophilia. These are those single giant polyped, large polyp stony corals. When they're imported into this industry, they are usually between 3 to 8 inches. And for the most part, that's kind of the size that they stay. We are not attempting any kind of aquaculture program for these guys. Fortunately, if this is a showpiece coral that you're interested in your home aquarium, what you see is kind of what you get with this. It is not something that is going to just take off explosively in growth on you, and oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this pizza-sized colony? That's not going to really happen. They're going to stay roughly that size for a very, very long time. Okay, next up, we have toadstool leathers. Soft coral time. Most people associate soft corals with fast growth, and I get it. There are a ton of fast growing ones. Things like Kenya trees, things like Cispicillaria and Xenia. You would think that leather corals across the board would kind of share in that growth rate. With toadstools, not so much, and it's deceptive. Toadstool leathers can grow massive. We have a couple of colonies here, 1 foot, maybe even 2 feet across, enormous, but they are way more slow growing than people give them credit for. Some of those corals have been growing here for about 5 years to get to that size. We do propagate these things all the time into 1-inch frags, but there's a reason why you don't see a lot of aquaculture toadstools. They're kind of slower. Okay, next up on this list, we have some non-photosynthetic corals, mainly Tubastria and Dendrophilia. These guys, in theory, should be fairly fast growing. So I'm going to go ahead and chalk up this one to user error. I think that people underestimate the amount of food that they require. They pretty much spend all day eating if you are able to keep up with their feeding requirements. They will reward you with staying open more and much, much faster growth rates. Unfortunately, we live in the real world. People typically cannot keep up with that feeding regimen. And so these corals, assuming that they're surviving okay, tend to grow slowly. Last on this list, I have an SPS for you. We have yellow porites. And I suppose this goes to show you that really when people are saying SPS, they're only talking about Acropora, because a lot of that fast growth associated with SPS completely lost on this variety of porites. Not all porites are that slow growing. We have like a Darth Maul variant, fairly fast growing, a couple of others here and there, but by far the most desirable porites is this canary yellow variant from Fiji, and it is so incredibly sluggish to grow. Now, it might have that user error thing going on, much like the non-photosynthetic guys, because this coral is found in incredibly bright areas of the reef, right up at the water surface. So most home aquariums are not able to give it that 1,000 to 2,000 par that it probably wants. In order to get that canary yellow color, a lot of light. Coupled with that, even more light might be necessary to make this thing actually grow. We do have an active propagation of these guys going on, but there's no way that we can keep up with the demand for them, so we offer them just every now and again. All right, guys, that does it for this list of some of the slowest growing corals in the reef aquarium hobby. Like I mentioned to start the video, there are a lot of good reasons to pick out some slower growing variants, so hopefully this list helps you out a lot. Until next time, happy reefing.